Welcome to Mind Fitness Warriors. We are here interviewing those who have gone through the deepest valleys of mental health and have risen out the other side with a story to share. This is all about a holistic approach to a fit and healthy mind. And today I am really excited to be inviting on Brittany Ann. She has an incredible story with lupus and mental health. She's a mental health advocate. She's also a blogger, and she's a stylist. So she comes to us from Calgary, Alberta with, again, an incredible journey to share with us. And I'm really honored that you're here with us, Brittany. And I invite you to just start from the beginning, share your heart, share your journey, take us on your story of where it all began and where you are right now in your recovery process. So if you're ready to go, I'd love for you to get started.
Perfect. I'm really excited to be here. I kind of through my platform, this is something that I am a huge advocate about, so I'm excited to tell my full story. I would say I kind of started noticing signs of anxiety, panic, and depression in my last couple of years of high school, actually. I wouldn't say I noticed it quite right away. It started with small things that most people probably really wouldn't think of. I remember that this one incident really sticks out in my mind. I remember I would come to school in these eccentric kind of outfits. One outfit in particular, they were these loose fitting floral pants, and you see them in every store now, which is funny, but I used to get teased about little stuff like that. And when you kind of already have the feelings of anxiety, panic, and depression, you kind of start to believe almost what people are saying. And after things like that happen so many times, I personally started developing a very perfectionistic attitude towards things I could control, like my appearance or even my bedroom and my closet. My closet used to be color coded and completely like short sleeve to long sleeve. And it was one of those things where it had to be that way. Otherwise, I would start feeling very anxious. And for me, I didn't really understand what anxiety or panic or even depression was myself. So to explain how you're feeling to someone is hard when you can't even explain it to yourself. So on the outside, I looked like a happy, normal teenage girl. I had a fairly large group of friends, and I was going out on weekends. And I think going out on weekends is actually when things started to change for me. And the problem was I wanted to go out on weekends because I wanted to start drinking. I wanted to numb the pain I was having. And this was in high school. So I was trying to find people that also wanted that and surrounding myself with people that enjoyed going out and enjoyed drinking. And it kind of got to a point where I almost was a prisoner inside myself. I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to. And the one thing that kind of sucks is this is around when Bell Let's Talk had become very popular. And the thing is especially when you're in high school, people will portray themselves kind of different in person as they do online. And when people online are saying, if you need help, like I'm here to talk to you, but in person, they don't really give that kind of attitude, you feel like you don't have anyone to talk to. And that's when I started kind of entertaining the idea of maybe like suicide. And I wasn't thinking about it constantly, but it wasn't something that I was necessarily scared of or something that I kind of pushed away. And that's kind of when I needed to do something about it. And I know I needed to do something about it, but I didn't want to talk about it. I felt like I just needed a fresh start. And for me, this was around the time that I had actually graduated high school. So I moved away from high school because I thought that would be the easiest way to have a fresh start. My first semester of first year of university was good. I felt more in control of my emotions. I felt like I was engaging more with people. And eventually, closer to Christmas, I started kind of having those anxious and panic and even really long periods of sadness return. And it hit a point where I didn't want to go out. I didn't really want to talk to anyone at all. And then that's when the switch flipped for me again. And I constantly went out and I was drinking and I was numbing myself with the idea of alcohol because it allowed me not to feel anxious and it allowed me not to feel depressed. And I felt like I was more of the fun, upbeat person that I remember I used to be very long ago. And it got to the point where I was drinking to black out, to not remember those nights. And when you drink with dealing with anxiety and depression, it makes your lows even lower and it makes them feel like they're dragging on a lot longer. And that went on for quite a while. And I stopped feeling motivated and I felt like I was in a daze, just kind of on autopilot going through my days. But it just so happens at the end of first year university, I had met this guy and eventually he had become my boyfriend. And at first, he made me feel extremely comfortable and confident. And that was the happiest I had been in a long time. I started to think that things were going to look up. And it just so happens that that relationship completely did a 180 and it became extremely mentally and emotionally abusive. And I was made to feel completely worthless. And looking back, like feeling worthless, like that's a strong word to describe how you're feeling. And this was done by kind of controlling my every action. And I began thinking of scenarios about leaving, but I was scared for potentially what would happen more. Like, would it turn more physical? Would it turn even more aggressive? And I just felt trapped. And I started having very bad anxiety, panic, and depression throughout that. And during this time, I actually had gotten inflammation and fluid around my heart, and I was in the hospital. And they prescribed me an anti-inflammatory medication. And it was supposed to be short term, but it turns out I was on it for 3 years on and off. And during that moment in my life, I felt so weak. I felt completely out of control and I felt like I had no one to talk to and I was lost. I didn't want to feel like a burden to anyone. So keeping those emotions in felt like the easiest option and the best option. And kind of around then is when suicide was on my mind constantly. I had that probably almost every moment of every day, and I didn't know what to do. And to me, that felt like it was going to be my only option. And around that time, I actually had the condo I was living in sold. So my parents were coming down to help me move. And I thought, I need to do something. This is probably the only opportunity I'm going to have a clean break from this relationship, get out of it, move forward, continue with my life. And I thought that once that was done, it would stop. So once I had kind of ended it, it was a very aggressive, kind of abusive ending. And it took a very long time for me to accept the things that were said and done during that. But once I moved out, I started kind of working on myself. And it was more of a grass is greener on the other side type of situation. I had gained a little bit of weight when I was sick because I couldn't do as much. So I thought maybe losing that weight would help me go back to normal. I thought that was the problem that I had. But obviously that didn't go too well because I wasn't eating a lot and I was working out way too much. And I think when I knew that that was definitely unhealthy is when I had actually fainted in the condo I was living in. And I was living alone and I was probably out for about 10 minutes approximately. And that's when I knew I kind of needed to make a change because I was by myself and I had to learn to rely on myself. And I had actually gone to the grocery store to grab groceries, change everything, and I had a full-blown panic attack. And this was the first time I had ever had one. I used to have very panic situations, but this was the first time where I actually was debilitated and I felt like I was suffocating and I couldn't breathe. And the pressure that was building up in my head felt way too much and I began bawling. And I sat in the parking lot for probably a couple hours before I could kind of regroup myself enough to drive back home. And once I got home, I actually crawled into bed, completely ignored everyone for probably about 2 days. And once I finally felt I guess, up for it to even just like get out of bed, I started beginning to get more panic attacks, and they happened more frequently. So when I would go out in public, I would have to find like a bathroom or kind of a quiet space to hide because I would just start bawling and hyperventilating. And it got to the point where I resorted back to drinking to numb the pain and numb the way that I was feeling. And when I hit my deepest low is when I knew alcohol wasn't enough anymore, and I had to do something that was stronger than that. And knowing in the back of my mind that I still had heart problems going on, and that dabbling with something like drugs is dangerous alone, but especially knowing that I had health problems going on, and it was kind of one of those things. I knew what I was doing, and I knew why I wanted to do it. I didn't feel happy with where I was. I felt completely numb. I felt alone. And once I had done it, I came home and I cried for probably about 2 days because I knew what I did and I knew my intentions of that. And that's kind of when something inside me clicked, and I knew I didn't want to feel that way again. I knew I didn't want to feel completely alone and scared. And I started seeing a counselor regularly. I kept this quiet for quite some time just because I didn't want to feel judged. And then from there, I started looking into like healthy eating, proper exercising. I stopped my anti-inflammatory medication, which looking back, probably not the best, but I found kind of different ways to do it. So I found a lot of foods that were more like anti-inflammatory and that were supposed to help with things like that and heart health. And that's kind of when I started feeling a little bit more optimistic about the future. And the positivity lasted for a little while, but I kind of knew that something was still off. And I would wake up in the morning, and even getting out of bed or showering made me feel like in constant pain. And that's when I kind of started getting my anxiety back and panic and depression, because I would push myself so hard and I would become so physically and mentally exhausted that I didn't know what to do anymore. And I went to my family doctor, and she had told me that the things I was dealing with were completely in my head. Like, they weren't real. So when a doctor kind of tells you you're imagining it, like, you kind of think maybe maybe I'm going crazy. And that's kind of when my anxiety, depression, my panic attacks started becoming a little bit more full-fledged again. I could see myself slipping back into that deep low, but I didn't want to hit that deep low again because I know how it felt. And it got to the point where I completely just removed myself from my body, and it was almost like I was looking and just on autopilot knew what I needed to do. And I would just get to that point where I would want to come home and I would cry myself to sleep for hours. And I would either come home and sleep for 12 hours plus, or I maybe get an hour of sleep. And that's when I kind of knew I needed to maybe say something to someone. And I told one of my best friends, and she had actually mentioned how she kind of hit a down period and she started on antidepressant just for a little bit, and it kind of helped her. So I thought maybe this would be my one option. And at that time I felt completely lost, and I went on it, and I knew I needed to maybe get that little kick. I didn't know what it was. And around that time, I actually found out I had a gluten allergy. So that was a lot to take in because I was already struggling with so much. So then taking in a whole thing about food and diet on top of that, I felt very overwhelmed. But for me, it ended up being kind of a positive just because I had to force myself to be more conscious of the things I was doing and conscious of myself, my surroundings. I couldn't daze through my days anymore. I had to try to be more alert. And that's when I started doing a lot of food research. I would read books and watch tons of documentaries And then from there, it kind of stemmed to yoga and meditation. And with that, I started using essential oils. I started getting acupuncture massages. I actually started seeing a medium for spiritual guidance, and then along with my counselor. And that's kind of when I knew that I was making the right steps. And that's when I knew that there was kind of something out of line with my health, just because with yoga and meditation, they're very focused on the mind, body, and soul. And that's when I knew that there was definitely something that was not in line. And it ended up kind of bringing me to a new family doctor who believed me, thankfully. And she sent me for a whole bunch of tests. And I don't do well with waiting for results, and my anxiety was pretty bad and I was overwhelmed. And I went to different doctors, and I've had doctors say, oh, it might be a brain tumor. Oh, you might have a potential cancer growth on your spine. Oh, no, don't worry. It's just a normal growth on your spine. So when you hear those things, you're so overwhelmed and you're trying to do the best you can to understand what's happening. But eventually, they had actually found out I had lupus. And this is a pretty new diagnosis, to be honest. It's only been a couple months. But once I heard that, I felt relieved. I knew that that was what was causing my previous health problems. I knew I wasn't crazy. It's kind of one of those things where you need to trust yourself. And since then, I've actually stopped on my antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, and I'm finding new ways to treat myself and make sure that my body is in good health. And some of those things are just eating as healthy as possible, cutting out excessive caffeine or alcohol, using essential oils, meditations. I go to the chiropractor and massage every couple of weeks. I still see my counselor every couple of weeks. I go to a medium every couple of months still for spiritual guidance, and I'm going to actually be adding a naturopath, so I'm very excited about that. But I think going through that whole up and down routine, and it was a constant battle, because it wasn't just a one way. It was definitely ups and downs. And I think knowing that I knew something was wrong was definitely, it's positive to know now, because I'm at peace with myself, and I don't remember the last time I was. And I think it's important, because me being at peace, I'm able to accept my past. I'm able to accept the insecurities, the blame that I would put on myself, and realizing how much stronger I have become because of it all, and having to deal with all those ups and downs. And for me, a couple months ago, I shared my first mental health post on my blog, and it felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders, because prior to that, I really didn't tell many people. And it was nice, because it felt like I was no longer hiding, or not having a mask on anymore. And I think because of that, now I know the direction that I'm headed. I know that I'm wanting to help people that have had similar experiences to me, or experiences that are completely different. Because when people will come to you and say that you have helped them, and you don't know them or you've never met them, like, that is the most rewarding thing ever. And kind of just ending that whole stigma around mental health is something I'm very passionate about, and encouraging and motivating people. And that is definitely the direction that I'm heading in now. So I'm very excited.
Awesome. What a story. That's so incredible. And you know what I love that you talked about is how you had to advocate for your own health. You had to advocate for, you knew something was going on in your body, and you knew
Mm-hmm.
something wasn't right. Something was off. Something didn't feel aligned for you. And the fact that you were being told you were okay, and you were being told you were fine, and I could feel that was pressure for you, and and just having to kind of sit with your own thoughts and say, well, wait a second, no, something is not right. And we're so connected to our bodies, and you knew that something was wrong. You advocated for your health. And when you finally got that answer, it was just so relieving to know that that connection that you have with your body was bang on, and it was right. And that probably played a role in some of your recovery with on your mental health journey as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I definitely think it did, because I know it put a lot of pressure. And for me, I know that now the lupus is affecting kind of like my heart, my lungs, and my brain. And when things are off in your brain, that's kind of when you notice a lot more happening. And I think that now that, I know to manage it a little bit better. And I know my outlets. I know that my blog is a great way to have an outlet. It's my platform. I know that painting or journaling. And I think learning those things, especially even once you kind of have reached the base of why that's happening, is good to have. And it is a good strategy to use. And it's good to tell people, because sometimes people don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're also advocating for speaking out too. I think that's such a huge part of what we're doing right now with moving people towards the positive framework of mental wellness, and knowing that we all have brains, which means we all have mental health, whether it's in a healthy state, whether it's in a diseased state. We all have mental health just like we have physical health. And so I feel that power behind what you're doing, and being able to just speak out about the journeys that we all go through. It's the same thing like somebody speaking out about a weight loss journey, right? And people are so hesitant to talk about what they've been through, even if it's been years, 10 years plus, of going through anxiety or depression or thoughts of suicide. Like, those are things that when we speak out about it, that we can receive the right help. And as you noted, sometimes we ask for help, but we don't get the right help. We get someone who is telling us we're fine. And that's where it's just time to be, okay, well, this wasn't the right help for me. And I'm going to keep advocating until I know I get the answer that I feel inside I deserve. So I'm so proud of you for doing that. And I'm so happy that you've done that, because you now have this story to share, and you are going to be one of the change makers and one of the influencers that help other people that are going through this. And hopefully, I know we both had journeys that started when we were younger. Hopefully that through these stories, people can receive the help earlier, rather than having to spend years going through that cycle and feeling alone. So I'm so appreciative that you've shared that. So is there any last kind of golden nugget that you want to leave with our viewers, something that, for you was really powerful in your recovery, and even on your recovery road right now, because it's never going to be perfect, but is there something that you wanted to leave for our audience, some words of encouragement or something that really worked for you that you would encourage them to check out?
Well, I definitely think it's one of those things for just encouraging people around you. Don't put them down, because you really don't know what they're going through. And the smallest thing, or something that you think might be a joke, might not be. And I think just making sure that you are open and making people around you feel comfortable and encouraged, so they do feel like they have someone to talk to, is definitely the most important part. And for me, if you can just help one person, that might be the one person that needs your help the most. And I think that's really what everyone should do, kind of just the golden rule of treat everyone how you want to be treated.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for being here. And we will pop up all your social media handles. So anyone that wants to connect with you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or just on your blog. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. And thank you for sharing your journey and your story. And I know that there is definitely at least one person out there that needed to hear your message. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications every time we drop a new episode here on Mind Fitness Warriors. Take care, everyone.